Welcome back to the Points Per Podcast. I'm Will, and that's Eric. And today we're tearing through the biggest dynasty in fantasy football misconceptions your league still believes. If you want sharper takes and more wins, hit subscribe, drop a like, and let's get into it. Eric, how you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. I'm excited to get into this one. I feel like this is a way that if it reaches the right audience, we can help some people improve, whether it be dynasty or regular fantasy football. And also, there's a lot of like nuance and kind of difficult topics to sort through that I think will be just really good conversations. So I'm excited to get into it.
Absolutely. So, just to kick things off, started off with the first point we got on here. We have always prioritizing youth. Now, this is sort of a fantasy football take, also mainly a dynasty take. So, we're going to break this one down and just exactly what we mean here. But, Eric, go ahead and break down some of the context to this one right here with always prioritizing youth.
So this one, I feel like more than most of the other ones we're going to talk about is situation dependent. There's going to be a little bit of that with everything that we talk about today, but this one is going to be affected most by whether you're contending in Dynasty or whether you're rebuilding. In my opinion, really the only reason that youth matters is value retention in terms of like how you value specific players. And even if an older veteran is producing later into their career, they're not going to retain as high a value as somebody who's both young and producing for obvious reasons in a dynasty context. So, as a contender, it's going to matter less to you the age of your players because the main thing is production and winning now. Whereas rebuilding, you're going to care more about that value retention because you need to hold on to that for longer into your competing window later down the road.
Absolutely. And I feel like, even especially with this year, with the young wide receivers, for example, even with the guys like Emeka Egbuka, he sort of did like the reverse of a rookie season where he kind of had the hot first half of the start and then cooled off a lot towards the end. Whereas
Yeah.
Tetterell McMillan sort of cooled towards the start, really picked it up at the end and really, set that forward. So there's been this sort of trend that people think that these rookie wide receivers are always going to break out early now or rookie year one breakout or they're a bust. And I don't really think that's the case. I think that is a trend, but it's not really a universal thing. I think we're still seeing very similar trends with these rookies as time goes along. And also that year two, three breakout is really turning into a thing as we're starting to see with guys like JSN or even when Chris Godwin broke out, I believe that was year three that he really took off. So when it comes to, like you said, scheme, QB play, target composition, that matters a lot more than age, than, situation, stuff like that. So in a situation where you're like, I want to get the 21-year-old who might be good in 3 years, or the proven veteran who's in a good situation, in cases where you're competing and you want to win now, you want to look at that veteran in that case. Whereas the other case, maybe you want that younger guy because, like Eric said, that value is going to keep going forward. It may hold a little bit longer if they produce at least a respectable level early on.
Yeah. And I think balance is key. That's another thing that we're probably going to harp on throughout the video. You don't want to go all in one direction or the other, whether you're a rebuilder or a contender. In a rebuilding scenario, I could see hoarding picks and things like that. But you also want to make sure that you have assets and players that aren't super risky. And a lot of those young guys that haven't proven themselves yet can be on that riskier side and could potentially tank your team value. And as a contender, even if you are trying to win now, in order to kind of prolong your winning window and that dynasty potential, you want to have both the youth and the veteran production.
So with using that, because this is kind of a good segue, just because it is the next point we have listed, with consistency being a key predictor, that kind of comes along with, like you said, having that veteran who is tried, true, has proven. They have that coaching staff as well who has been tried, true, and proven. Like the best example I could give is Devontae Adams going into this year, an extremely
Mm-hmm.
people would consider an advanced age wide receiver, but still able to put up top 10 wide receiver numbers in a situation where it's just very fruitful for him. So you really do have to take the time to look and see what is it that my team needs right now in terms of production from the players that you have on your team.
Yeah, and so to take kind of a different angle to that point, because the misconception that we're kind of addressing here is consistency is a key predictor, and obviously in the case that you brought up, like consistency from a producer is really important to winning. But I think that consistency just generally in fantasy football is overrated. I think that it's super fleeting. It's not something that you should really be chasing because there's so much. Fluctuation and variance in this game that we play that like trying to chase consistency over upside or whatever the case may be, I think is kind of a fool's errand. And also, I think people get it in their head that like some players are just inherently more consistent than other players, but I don't think that's true. I think consistency is more of a additive of one talent, but then also situation and health,
Mhm.
right? And so it's not that somebody just is consistent. They are a talented, good football player in a good situation and they're not getting injured. As soon as, one of those things goes awry, then they're not consistent anymore. And so it's one of those things that nobody should have a consistent tag. We should look at the context, and talent of those three things is really the one that's going to be the most consistent of the three, and that's the one that's most worth betting on.
Yeah, because we've learned even this year, the best wide receiver in the league is one JJ McCarthy away from
Yeah.
obscurity. So you
Yeah,
really do have to take that kind of stuff into account. You can't just blindly look at consistency and say, oh, this person's been doing this, they're going to continue to do it. It's just not really how the game works at the end of the day. There's too many variables.
exactly.
This is another point we have right here is you need to win the trade. Now, for me, I personally look at trades as they need to fulfill a need for your team. And people trying to look at things as a win or a loss, it's very short-sighted because eventually you don't really know how a trade is going to play out for weeks, sometimes even years if it's a dynasty league. You won't even
Yeah,
know the repercussions of a trade. So Dynasty at the end of the day is it's not Pokemon. You're not trying to collect the best players on your team because it's never really going to happen that way. But what you really need to do is find the best players that fit for your team and that fit your timeline for your team and
yeah,
look at things like that. So when you're looking at, two dynasty managers, they can look at one player in two completely different ways. Where a rebuilding team could see a 29-year-old running back as a depreciating value, a contending team could look at it as a league-winning asset. So you really have to take that kind of time to look at other people's rosters, and just kind of look and see where the direction is they're going with their team as well. Because value is always contextual; it's not universal.
100%. Yeah. I think that mindset is just a bad one to be in general. One, from the perspective that you talked about, where it's not necessarily that you need to win the trade, you need to improve your team, right? Like that's the biggest factor. But also a mindset of needing to win the trade, I feel like leads to a lot fewer trades getting done and typically makes it so your league mates want to trade with you less. Like you hurt your trade relationship with other people in your league, when you're always trying to get the advantage or make sure like you're always trying to squeeze an extra pick into a trade when it's not necessary or whatever so that you win. It's going to hurt you in the long run with your ability to make deals with other players. And uh, like it honestly doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to win the trade necessarily. You need to focus specifically on your team, let the rest of the cards kind of fall as they may. um, it's okay if there's trades that are win-win for both sides, right? Like I make trades like that. That's the majority of
Hmm.
trades that I make is like somebody's improving their team, whether it's in a rebuilding direction, contending direction. We could both be going in the same direction. We both improve, and that's okay. I think as long as you're improving your team, even if maybe you take a little bit less value, that's what's important, especially on the contending side. You want to be making your team better and trying to push for that championship.
100% agree. I think at the end of the day, we need to stop looking at it as winning trades and we need to look at it as winning windows,
Yeah,
just windows of time.
I think the timeline aspect is an important one for sure.
Absolutely. Which, while we're on the topic of trades, our next misconception, buy low and sell high is easy. Now, we've all seen the videos, we've all seen the tweets. Yeah, go ahead and sell this guy high. Everybody sees that same tweet.
Yeah.
Everyone in your league is thinking this guy is going to be a sell high. No one's going to go for that kind of trade.
Yeah.
This buy low, sell high sort of culture is just kind of weird. But what are your thoughts on buy low, sell high, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I don't know that it's weird. Like ideally, in the perfect world, in a vacuum, everybody would do that, and that would be the best way to do it. But because every single person in Dynasty or all of fantasy football, that's what they're trying to do, it's never going to come together. Like if one person wants to buy low, then somebody has to sell low. If one person wants to sell high, then somebody has to buy high. Like that's just how it goes. You can't have both at the same time. And so for me, the point that I kind of want to get across in this video is that it's okay to buy high and to sell low. In fact, a lot of times it's less risky to buy a player when they're kind of trending up in their trajectory or to sell a player when they're starting to trend down. and you still often get a value gain. Maybe not the most extreme value gain if you got them at the bottom or if you sold them at the top, but a lot of times that's just not realistic anyway. Um, of course, the flip side, like you don't want to be buying at somebody's absolute peak or selling at someone's absolute floor, but it's okay to be a little late in the buy sell window. Um, like not being able to get maximum value shouldn't stop you from getting some value.
Absolutely agree. I think when I say it's weird, I kind of meant like that. It's just that everybody kind of knows that it's happening. So
Yeah.
it kind of affects the trade in a way. So it's strange. It's not easy, like you said. You really do have to be kind of smart about it. And you also have to have team or not teammates, but league mates who are also, cognizant of, what the trade is being made and how to be fair about that trade as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Next up, we've got you can predict breakouts or flops with one metric. Now, there's a ton of metrics in fantasy football that we've tried to designate as the king of the metrics that one above all. We've got target share, 40-yard dash times, college dominator ratings, yards per route run. There's been a ton of them. But at the end of the day, metrics are tools. They're not prophecies. They're not going to tell you exactly what a player is going to do at the next level. A 25% target share on a bottom five offense doesn't mean as much as a 20% target share on an elite offense, a top five offense. Or a 4.340 doesn't mean anything if the guy can't run a route, and vice versa. High dominator rating doesn't mean anything if the guy goes to a small school and doesn't play against NFL competition or can't beat NFL competition. So when you're really looking at it, analytics without context is really it's just math at the end of the day. You're just looking at numbers. But what you really need to do is not pick a side and try to blend what I would consider to be like three different components. So I like to watch film and analytics, and then just look at the situation on when that player is going to get the opportunity. And when all three of those align, that's when you get a real player profile.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And even if you want to boil it down to like just analytics, you can't just look at one stat. Like it's even then in that context, it's still about the entire picture and looking at the whole body of production of work. There's way too much variance and nuance in this game to think that everything can boil down to one stat. And so, for example, you brought up yards per route run, right? When people look at wide receiver play, that's one of the most predictive and most important things that we look at. And those things are true. It is more important than some other stats. It's a very valuable one to look at. But if you went into your 2025 rookie drafts and just sorted wide receivers by yards per route run, your top guys would have been Trey Harris, Tez Johnson, Deontay Thornton, and Ricky White. Like, it can't be the only thing that we look at, right?
Yeah.
And if guys have high yards per route run and they're getting drafted really late, it makes sense to take a shot on them, right? Like, Deontay Thornton kind of had a value window there for a second where he was getting hyped up and you didn't have to pay that much to get him. I get that. That makes sense. But, some of these guys that are going closer to the high end where yards per route run is the only thing holding up their production profile, kind of like a Trey Harris, you got to look deeper than that to realize that he might not be all that.
I do think it's funny that you bring up Tez Johnson as one of the guys too, because he had that high profile and then he dropped a lot because he had a very, very slow 40-yard dash time. He measured in like 150 pounds, whatever it was he was. But then he actually did end up producing at the next level because he's one of those guys when you look at him on tape, you think he's going to be good in the NFL, but then everything else didn't really come together when it came to, the combine and looking at, size and things like that historically. But when he did get the opportunity, because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver room was a bit of a carousel, he did end up doing pretty well with it. Scored a few touchdowns this year, whole 9 yards. So, yeah, it's just you got to, like you said, you really got to weigh each thing and see how much that really weighs for you, how much it matters to you.
100%. Yeah, I agree.
Going on to the next one, we have ADPs and rankings are groupthink, not facts. Well, sorry. The misconception here is ADP is the truth. What I believe is that ADP is groupthink and they aren't facts.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, average draft position is literally just a bunch of people drafting averaged together. Now, if that group is hyped on a player, that ADP rises. If a group is low on a player, it falls. It's not a ranking. It's not a projection. It's not a scouting report. It's just a temperature check of what everybody in the room is feeling at that time. That's literally all it is. So when you look at it, public opinion is usually late, emotional, and wrong for the most part. But especially when it comes to things like injury overreactions, rookie uncertainty, and just depth chart assumptions. At the end of the day, ADP comes down to what we assume is going to be the starter for teams too, which
Yeah.
oftentimes ends up being wrong.
I was going to emphasize that too, is because public perception when it comes to reactionary things, I
Hmm.
think I completely agree with you, and that's typically the case. I do think the longer that fantasy has been around, the longer we play this game, the better consensus gets. Right? Like
Yes.
I don't think it's necessarily bad to kind of stick relatively close to ADP and rankings because it's typically the safest option. But you are going to miss out on a lot of value that way. There's going to be a lot of undervalued or overvalued players based on ADP that if all you're doing is strictly following ADP and rankings, you're going to miss out on potential value gain in either direction. To single out some players specifically that you might have missed out on this summer if you were strictly following those rules. George Pickens, in the summer, he was wide receiver 33. Now he's wide receiver 10. He was a guy that we shouted out heavily during the offseason.
Yep.
Colston Loveland, Luther Burden, Drake May, Trevor Lawrence, Chris Olave, all these guys were ranked too low and ended up being pretty big values. From a dynasty perspective, Loveland and Burden, I think more so than
Yeah.
a redraft perspective. But I think the big question here then is if we're not going to just blindly follow ADP and rankings, like how do we find these values? And for me, some of the biggest things to pay attention to, and again, context matters. Don't just do this blindly. But if a player changes team or gets a new coaching staff, that's a big indicator, right? Like people might just continue to draft them at the level of production that they've been at. Things could drastically change under new conditions. Talent wins out over situation in the long run. I put this one in there specifically for the likes of Colston Loveland and Luther Burden. Their situation that they walked into was a very crowded receiver group, but we knew that they were both immensely talented and in a good coaching staff situation. And we saw that at the end of the season, they both rose to the top. And then also, I think one that we've been harping on for years at this point is fade the injury prone tag. That one for Chris Olave, and there's been plenty of others
Oh,
throughout the
Christian
years.
McCaffrey this year.
Well, yeah, duh,
Yeah.
exactly. And that can come back to bite you. Anybody can get injured at any point in time, and that's just how this game works. But don't fade somebody specifically because you think they're injury prone. You'll miss out on the RB1 and Christian McCaffrey, or you'll miss out on a great season from Chris Olave and tons of other examples.
Absolutely. So I guess it all pretty much boils down to try not to be too biased by things in the past as well. Don't get too bought in on name values at the same time. Don't think someone's going to be exactly who they are last year going into this year just because they're the same person. That's not always the case.
Yeah,
But yeah, situation's super important.
absolutely.
And then moving to the next, we've got draft picks are always better than proven players. Why don't we break that one down, Eric?
Yeah, so this one I think is pretty interesting. It's probably the most nuanced of any of the topics that we've talked about, and also very situation dependent. I would actually say, and not for misconception, but like this is actually my opinion, that draft picks in general always retain value better than active players in general. Not one for one, not specifically necessarily, but just across the board, draft picks versus players because draft picks can't get hurt, they can't get benched, they can't have their situation get worse. It's just a draft pick, so they're almost always going to maintain or even increase value, especially as you get closer to draft season. So therefore, they're a less risky asset to hold on to, but they do become risky as soon as you make the pick. But prior to that pick becoming a player, it's always a safer asset to hold on to. And then, once you get past that kind of general point, then it becomes situation dependent, whether you're a contender or a rebuilder. Obviously, picks don't produce points, so they're going to be inherently less valuable to a contender. And the other way around for a rebuilder, you don't want to score points, especially if you're trying to tank for high picks and they hold value longer. So there's a whole bunch of ways that you can look at it, but that's kind of my general take there.
No, I absolutely agree with that take. I think it's that infinite potential that's sort of there with the draft pick that's so alluring. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, like you said, that's something you can use for you or against you. You got to really know how you're using your draft picks and what direction your team is headed in, and that's gonna, help you go forward.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we should really hone in on too is like you don't have to hold your draft picks to make the pick. Holding on to draft picks right before draft season, then trading them for productive players is a fantastic strategy for improving value. Um, Obviously, I like to make draft picks just as much as anybody. It's fun. It's exciting. We do a ton of deep dives into our rookie draft evaluation to try to make it so it's a less risky proposition and you can make better rookie draft picks. But I think that that's kind of the time to flip when you have people thinking exactly what you said. There's that infinite potential of that draft pick. Use that to get the best value kind of at the end of the day, right before you would make the pick.
Oh yeah, people are chomping at the bit on draft day for sure.
100%.
Especially when those names, people start flying off the board and they say how stuff starts falling.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good time.
And that's going to lead us into our final point here, which is going to be that the misconception of draft capital equaling production instantly. Now, the reality of it is that draft capital predicts opportunity, not talent. Teams invest more in picks, so they get more snaps, more targets, more patience from coaches, more chances to fail, really. But draft capital doesn't measure things like football IQ, route running, vision, competitiveness. It's a probability. It's not a guarantee as to what the player it is you're going to get. So every year we get day 3 or undrafted free agent breakouts who just end up taking off and just end up going to the stratosphere. Just to name a few, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 4th rounder. Puka Nacua was a day 3 guy. Tyreek Hill, 5th rounder. Stephon Diggs, 5th rounder. Aaron Jones, 5th rounder. Austin Eckler, undrafted free agent. There were years he was the RB1 in fantasy.
Yeah.
So those guys weren't supposed to be stars because their draft capital said, we don't know what's going to happen with them. But their talent ended up saying, this is what we can do, and they put it down on the field. So the dynasty edge comes from identifying these profiles before that breakout happens. So when it comes to, high draft capital busts that happen, they do happen pretty often as well. Just to name a few off the top of my head: N'Keal Harry, Jalen Reagor, Kevin White, Laquan Treadwell, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, if you've been with this channel for a while, Trent Richardson, Josh Rosen. Those are times where draft capital gave them the opportunity, but talent failed to really convert it on the field, or situation failed to convert it on the field as well. I don't want to completely blame the players.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this kind of ties into a lot of the things that we've talked about where their context matters, right? It's not all about one thing. It's not all about the draft capital. You got to do your due diligence to understand the analytical profile, the film perspective, the situation that these players are walking into before you decide what draft capital means. I think you made a good point in summarizing that it does typically mean a longer leash, more opportunity, and that is important. But I think it's also more important at some positions versus others. Like we know that opportunity at running back is closer to king than anywhere else. But when you look at wide receiver, you mentioned a bunch of good examples, but I have some here as well, where talent typically matters more than draft capital. You got guys like Matthew Golden, Xavier Legette, Keon Coleman, Jonathan Mingo, Kadarius Toney, all guys that were first round or just like borderline right at the beginning of the second round. They got drafted highly and people got hyped up about them because of the opportunity, but they had bad analytical profiles. They walked into bad situations, whatever it may be. And it was predictable. Like these were players that we were fading pretty much at all costs, and it worked out for us. So context is key. And I think that's probably kind of the king takeaway from this whole thing.
Absolutely. But what do you guys think about our fantasy misconceptions? Let us know down below. Do you think we had some good points here? And what are some misconceptions you figured out this past year that maybe we missed in this video that you want the comments to know? Comment those down below as well. But as always, if you guys made it this far into the video, we love you, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
Peace.